This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible by Nyu-Media. In episode 98 of Bullet Heaven HD, we took a look at Astroport's gigantic army, a giant robot-infused side-scrolling run-and gunner. We came away fairly impressed, despite its somewhat slow, though solid control.
Before Gigantic Army in 2010, Astroport made another mecha-based game called ARM7, which originally saw release to PCs in 2009. Even as a more traditional side-scrolling shmup, ARM7 clearly contains the basic structure that Gigantic Army would follow later down the line. Let's take a closer look.
To start, players select their loadout from a selection of weaponry to arm their mecha with a primary, secondary, and special weapon for use in ARM7's 7 stages. Shotguns, lasers, missiles, and more can be selected to create an arsenal that anyone can feel comfortable with. Of course, the power and firing frequency with all of these selections vary, so there's plenty to experiment with.
From there, the game thrusts its players into the intense war that only they can stop. Movement is locked into a simple 8-way scheme that feels swift enough to get around but also slow enough as to not get hit all of the time. Players have an armor stock that takes place of traditional lives, which can also be extended. With only a tiny hitbox that shows up when the bullets get crowded, it's also pretty easy to get through even dense bullet swarms.
Moving your craft up or down also changes the angle of the main gun. By default, it will lift when ascending and drop when descending, but settings exist for the opposite to happen, which actually feels quite a bit more natural. Performing a dodge below a shot usually allows for the gun to point more or less to the shot's source. This additional range of fire would make its way to Gigantic Army as well.
ARM7's power-up system also allows players to add to their gun's overall strength to deal a decent amount of damage to their opposition. There are also additional shield pickups that allow players to get away with getting hit with a stray shot every now and again without dipping into the main armor stock. Power-ups are dropped from carrier ships in red and blue, for firepower and shields respectively.
There are times that seriously hardcore firepower will be needed to damage larger enemies quickly, or to take down a boss in a swift manner. In cases when such extreme damage is required, a super strong attack can be activated that refills after a certain amount of time, indicated by a gauge in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Some are more powerful than others and may require more or less time to refill, but it all plays into the overall weapons loadout strategy that players will eventually develop to take ARM7 on, especially since there are no continues in this game.
There are a couple of issues though. For one, there's no way to pause the game. This makes things challenging if you've been drinking sodas for the last hour while playing you some computer games and you just so happen to have to go in the middle of some ARM7. Secondly, because there's no pause, there's no way to quit either. Having a bad run? Well, guess you'll have to waste time crashing into stuff.
But there's also a lot to do in ARM7 with the addition of in-game emblems and achievements that have been expanded into Steam for the Steam release of this game. Multiple difficulty levels and a decent overall challenge awaits for players that want to collect them all, and with solid gameplay that stays in a pretty safe zone, it's fun the whole while. There's even an addictive little scoring system in here as well. Much like the Raiden series, scoring high in ARM7 depends primarily on the speed by which specific enemies are destroyed. The faster, the better. If a player can dispatch the more robust enemies they encounter, a multiplier is applied.
Using your mecha's super attacks to do this will allow for a much faster kill rate, though use of these weapons could leave open gaps for scoring opportunities to slip through, if you're not careful.
Additional scoring is also achieved by maintaining a maximum power level in both your weaponry and shields, as pickups for each beyond max will yield a large amount of pointage. As always, the more the better, but there's a twist.
The scoring beyond max power is greater for higher difficulties. Collecting on a max power bonus on easy will be much less bountiful than doing it on hard.
At the end of the stage, a bonus for speed of boss destruction and amount of shields in reserve is applied, so maintaining your shield count and killing off the boss as quickly as possible, obviously, will be essential to player success in scoring.
Bearing these points in mind, players should easily be able to obtain the many extends that are possible in ARM 7 to keep the good times rolling right through to the end credits.
Astroport sure does know what it's doing when it comes to making its doujinshi efforts look and sound pretty great. Like Gigantic Army after it, ARM 7 is also fairly strong in the presentation department of things.
Visually, ARM 7 does some great things with its mechanical and aircraft design. Not only is everything well animated and presented, it looks pretty cool to boot. Things explode with satisfying effects, and the backdrops are pretty sweet as well, not only with a ton of parallax in places, but also with destructible elements.
On the whole, the sound is pretty good too, though the sampling used in the music seems to be a bit too heavy on the cheap MIDI side of things. Regardless, the tunage works well for the action on screen and sets the tone nicely. A couple of sound effects can grate on your ears every now and again though, like the special weapon charge indication, but otherwise all of the weapons and explosions are not bad at all.
Solid UI and menus round out the presentation along with over 40 achievements in the Steam version, which is always a bonus. Again, a lack of an obvious pause menu is questionable at best, but thankfully you'll likely be glued to ARM 7 anyway. But how does it stack up? Let's take a look.
The controls in ARM 7 have a slight layer of impreciseness to them, but they still work very well regardless.
Anyone can get the control scheme down, and customizable input allows for any controller to work well for it.
ARM 7 isn't especially difficult to get through for seasoned vets.
No continues and multiple difficulties can make things much more difficult to less skilled players, though.
7 moderately long stages works well for ARM 7's length, especially with no pause to speak of.
Multiple playthroughs to get all of the achievements and emblems adds replay, though.
As with Gigantic Army, ARM 7 has a great sense of style.
Good animation and solid design make ARM 7 a visual winner.
The music can be a bit too cheap sounding in ARM 7, but overall the composition works well throughout.
The sound effects in ARM 7 work well on the whole as well.
The choose-your-own loadout and multi-shield structure of ARM 7 is pretty fresh feeling and would pave the way for future titles specifically from Astroport.
Even though a lot of other shooters have done this kind of thing in the past, the very specific nature of your mecha's loadout is less common. But what the heck is up with no pause?
Well, Astroport does it again. ARM 7 is a shooting game that scratches an itch for hardcore horizontal shooting action with all kinds of mayhem, and it should pretty much be on everyone's drive. ARM 7 gets a 4 out of 5. Another great aspect to ARM 7 is its price. You can get ARM 7 today for about $5 on Steam, as well as other download sites such as Desura.